Those who do. But no one is going to let you do that. So why not try Wicket Cricket Manager to satisfy that urge? Pick your nation, pick your league, pick your players, and yell at them when they do poorly. You can find it in the links below or by searching for Wicket Cricket Manager in your app store today. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. Cricket is about partnerships, and this show was made in partnership with HCLTech. Yeah, the company you see on the Australian shirts. Supercharge your technology with them today. Morning, everyone, and welcome to the scoreboard. Well, Australia started off by getting ahead. I'll let that linger a little bit. Completely proving that only their openers can make runs, no matter who those openers happen to be, it looks at the moment. They slowed right down in the middle as Glenn Phillips proved to us all that he is the world's greatest off spinner. I expect Ashwin to do a video on this very, very soon. Probably a bit busy with the World Cup, but he's not playing that much. Maybe he could put something together on how great Phillips is. Australia still kicked back towards the end, though, however, a little bit of Maxwell hitting and got close enough to 400 to make it feel like they could have ended the contest without quite perhaps doing so. But New Zealand never went away. And Rachin Ravindra scored 100 with 130 strike rate. And they're right back in the game. But Zampa, top of the wickets table, Adam Zampa took some wickets. And in the end, it was up to Jimmy Neesham. Sadly, not for the first time in a World Cup. He batted really well, but came up a little bit short. But that wasn't the only game, of course. Netherlands forfeited their top order again. Scott Edwards made runs again. They went slow, but they just wanted to put something on the board and hope their bowlers could back it up. That's pretty much exactly what happened. Bangladesh lost 2 early wickets to spin, then a bunch to seam. And when Mahmudullah was finally tired of wearing a cape for them, as he has all the way through this World Cup, we ended up with some really turgid tail end batting. But the Dutch got their second win against a Test nation at a World Cup. Let us check the tape. All right. See what we have here today. Well, let's start with a little bit of Travis Head. So this is all the ODI batters with 900 runs in the last 2 years. It's a small sample size, but he is slightly less. I think most of the other players here have a lot more. You can see his circle's a little bit less. But Heinrich Klaasen, phenomenal. Shubman Gill, phenomenal. And Dawid Malan, let's put him up. These are the 4 guys who have just dominated the last 2 years of ODI cricket. Head's in a pretty good spot on this, right? Like this is really, really good. From a player who had struggled for a long period of time. You could make the argument that if he'd played for Australia all the way through this World Cup, would they potentially be in a different position at the moment? I don't know. I'm not sure how much he would have been involved, how much he could have swayed those first couple of games. And Mitch Marsh certainly played good at times as well. But Head, is just been a different level of recent times. In the first 10 overs in 2023, he averaged 72 with a strike rate of 146 in the power play. The second best was David Warner, by the way, with a strike rate of 118. So, Australia decided a little while back now that they were going to really attack at the top. And Head has been unleashed. And just to show exactly how good he's been, Lytton does. Oh, these are the guys with 1,000 runs, isn't it? That's not too bad. That's not as bad as I thought it was there. It's like, he's been okay. Forgot, a lot of players don't make 1,000 runs, do they? Anyway, or 900 runs, sorry. Travis Head's strike rate. So I could have done this with his average as well, although I think he might have had a bit of a spike in 2017 with his average. But moderate player in this period. Australia gave him lots of chances. You can see here, this is 2018. Doesn't come back till 2022. We saw a similar thing. He really has. I think he was a player when he first came into the Test team and the ODI team. Played T20s as well at that point. I can't remember. He had a lot of flaws. I talked about them a lot at the time. I thought there were many ways you could get him out. He still has some of those flaws, but he's worked out ways of mitigating them. And because he's so aggressive everywhere else, he's almost, a one-man baseball, right? He really, it's hard to get to his flaws when he's already hitting you for so many boundaries everywhere else. But this is a huge, huge step up. And I think we saw something similar with Aiden Markram as well. So we've seen a couple of players really come of age of recent times. And, he got his second 25 ball 50 this year, and he finished a power play with a strike rate of 200. We know that Australia wants Smith and Labuschagne, who've both had strike rates in the 80s. Travis Head is kind of perhaps buying them time. I'm not sure I agree that they need both of those players, but the way he's batting certainly allows them to do that. Talking about things that happened at the start of this game, let's have a look at Matt Henry. Someone's asked a question about Matt Henry, and I'm going to get to it later because they're wrong, and it's really interesting why they're wrong, I think. But this is Matt Henry in the power play by venue country. Now, there's going to be some small sample size in this a little bit. And you can see down here, he's got 5 wickets in the power play in the UAE, done quite well in Ireland, done brilliantly well in New Zealand, averaging 17 with a strike rate of 25. Then you got this middle clump here where he's averaging around mid-20s. These are all good. And remember, one of these is Pakistan and this one's UAE. There is something specific I would suggest about India that so far has not suited his power play bowling as much. We know that the reinforced seam is being used at this World Cup, but we haven't seen as much wobble ball. If you look back at the Asia Cup, for instance, even the Indian bowlers were getting the ball to jag around a lot more than they have been in this World Cup. It could also be the pitches that Matt Henry's been on. Hassan Ali, Chris Wokes, trying to think of some of the other sort of major wobble ball bowlers have struggled at times in this World Cup. And so it just hasn't moved around as much off the seam when they've wanted it to. But this is obviously an issue for Matt Henry. I thought I had another graphic for him. Maybe I don't have another graphic for him. Anyway. I do have another graphic. I knew I had another graphic for him. This is his most expensive spells in the power play. So he's been dominating the last couple of years. You can see that a lot of these go back to 2019. So before he really starts to become the bowler that he has been over the last few years. But this was something else entirely. And a little bit like Hassan Ali and Chris Wokes, especially at the paces that all three of them are at right now. There's not a lot for those sorts of guys to go back to. They're all fairly accurate bowlers, and Wokes and Hassan Ali have been quicker in the past. But there's no doubt that Matt Henry doesn't have he's quick, but he's not quick. He doesn't have a good back of he doesn't have a good short ball. His short ball's fine. He doesn't have a great slower ball. All those sorts of things. So when it's not working for him, he can go. But the interesting thing is that hasn't happened very often, right? So this is, it's fairly noticeable. I think you can all see that. I don't know if I need to move the blue dot around to show you this. I think you've got it. Anyway, let's go on to Mitchell Marsh. So Mitchell Marsh went back into the middle order today. First drop, wasn't he? But, left opening, I suppose, is the better way of putting that. We can see here that his power play so far, he's been averaging just over 40 with a strike rate of 90. Some of that will be at first drop as well. I think if we looked at this just by opening, it would be a little bit different. But you can see there, he's actually a fairly good manipulator. I noticed this a few years ago. His strike rate drops when he's manipulating a little bit, but he actually is not too bad at it. This is the interesting thing, of course, of this is strike rate, but also his average up here is 33. So Mitchell Marsh is a bit of a confusing batter because I think you want to open with him, but Travis Head is probably a better opener because he can manipulate the strike fairly well in this area. He's probably better served coming in around the 30th over if he's not opening. They have other players who could potentially bat number 3. I think Steve Smith is already upset, but if they want to keep going hard at the top, probably makes more sense for Mitch Marsh to bat at number 3. But I think in this tournament, especially, I think he will get stuck around this period. This period when it comes to strike rate, just because of the spinners and the way that he plays. He'll get the odd good matchup, of course. But it's something that is worth looking at going ahead for him. And this is him by record opening the batting compared to number 3. There's a couple of reasons I think this is interesting. One is that the way he plays in Asia, I think, is going to exacerbate this issue. But I also think that some of his stuff batting at number 3 is perhaps before we saw, Mitch Marsh fully understand who he was as a batter and, maybe fully exploded into the player he is right now. But you can see opening the batting is averaging 50 with a strike rate over 100. It's not working so far at number 3 for him. I think we saw some moments in South Africa, that could work for him. in that position. But I think if I was doing this, and I know that I'm going to get Head or Warner both scoring it around a run a ball and get a good start from the power play, I think Smith makes more sense at 3 in this particular lineup. And I love the idea of Marsh coming in at 3 and continuing to bash it around. But if he comes in around the 7th or 8th over the power play, he's probably not going to do that. I think Australia's got a big issue, and it has for a long time, that a lot of their batters really want to bat at certain numbers. To be fair, Marsh is certainly not one of those players. And because of that, it causes some issues. Realistically, if you lose an early wicket, you probably want Marsh to go in and be your backup opener. And if you lose a wicket towards the 8th or 9th over in the power play, or even after that, you probably want Smith to go in at that stage and manipulate and make sure you get Head or Warner on strike for as much as possible. Unfortunately, Australia doesn't really have that kind of, they don't really play with that kind of flexibility. And it's been an issue for a long time, I think, in their T20 and their one-day cricket. And Rachin Ravindra, he is doing incredible things so far. I just see that CS has written the line, and I'm not going to read this out as myself, but he said, "Is it too soon to crown Rachin Ravindra as the next great player in New Zealand cricket?" It is obviously too soon, but at the same point, he's done some things. And if you think about what he's been asked to do across his career so far, so starts in the test team in India, I think that was his first series. And they basically said, "Can you be our spinner?" Right? It's a huge call. And, batting down the order, we know he's an opening batter in that format. Then again, a Bracewell's not available. He's probably going to be the backup number 6, 7. Then Williamson isn't available. Now he's going to be the number 3. Then they're like, "Well, we have to keep you in the team. You're going to open." In a short period of time, he has managed to bat kind of everywhere they've needed him to go. He's been a frontline spinner, a backup spinner. He's really, really done well for someone who I think when I was talking to people in New Zealand about him, they all said, "Hey, he seems like a good cricketer." No one was saying he's going to be the next Kane Williamson or anything like that. And perhaps he's developed much quicker, playing international cricket or whatever it may be. But this was an outstanding innings, and I think we've got the highlights of it here. Yeah. So what we like about him from an international perspective is the fact that he can score against pace and against spin, and that at the moment anyway, he's shown multiple shots. I think what you need to be able to do to be successful, if you take away the wobble ball, I think the things that are most important in international cricket at the moment are probably handling the short ball. And I think we can argue that was handled. Is handling the short ball and then having multiple options to score against spin. And Rachin Ravindra is very, very good at that. I think we saw him sweep at times. We've seen him use his feet, and he can also go back against the spin. And he's very good against the short ball. He's not worried about that at all. That's a good shot. He'll take on the ball spinning away from him. Be interesting to see when he plays better bowlers. I want to see him tested a little bit more top of off stump, just outside, maybe over the wicket, around the wicket, try some different angles against him. Because I think that early on, when he might have failed in this World Cup, it might have been something along that line. But you also get that bump when you're a young player and people don't know that much about you. They quite often don't bowl exactly where they should be. Clearly, Australia decided that the short ball might be an issue there. Didn't feel like an issue. This innings was a very fast-paced scoring version of steadying the ship, right? So it's really, really extraordinary that he's replaced Williamson and managed to do it in a fashion that is with a higher strike rate and with bowling. Although Williamson was still bowling in the 2019 World Cup, of course. But 100 with a strike rate of 130, very impressive, especially in a losing effort. And he kept them within touch. And then, I think Neesham's innings will probably be the one that people remember a little bit more. And Neesham was outstanding, but that was certainly by that stage, Neesham had a huge ask ahead of him. Whereas if Rachin had batted even a little bit longer, they could have put a big dent in that. I actually saw it. Obviously, the New Zealand bowling didn't hold up particularly well, but I thought the batting was very, very good. And that was a big chase. And in some ways, I thought it was more impressive that New Zealand managed to lose than it was that Australia managed to win. Not to say that Australia didn't deserve their win, but just because chasing that kind of a total and losing a lot of wickets along the way I think is a very, very good effort from them. And I don't think outside of Stark, who was, I mean, we did Henry. We could have done Stark as well, or both of them. But I thought it was an excellent effort by New Zealand. And there was a part of me when I think it might have been when Mitchell and actually it might have been when Ravindra went out, where I thought if they lose this by a decent amount, where do I put them in the power list? By the end, I was like, I don't know. I think they still deserve to be right up there. I don't think that South Africa or Australia could have done this chase, based on what I've seen of those two teams so far. So of the top 4 teams, New Zealand is perhaps the only team that could have done that chase. So outside of India, of course, who like to chase. But I thought it was really, really interesting. Let us move on to the other game. Yeah, it is Bangladesh, Netherlands here. I want to start with this. This is really, really funny, but I won't bring it up yet. So England tried Mark Wood as the Liam Plunkett replacement, possibly because he was another fast bowler from the north. A little bit shorter, of course. And it hasn't gone particularly well for them so far. I think we can all admit that. But what if I told you that I would say the best replacement for Liam Plunkett I've seen in this tournament doing his job has been Paul van Meekeren, who also plays a counter cricket, of course, but sadly for England, not the right team. This is all the same as, I think this is with over 6 wickets. So I think I tried that. Let's see, who's this here? Must be over 4 wickets. This is all the same as with over 4 wickets between overs 10 and 14. And you've got, this is Coetzee down here. He's got the most wickets, but you can see that's a big economy rate. It's funny because I think this is Ngidi, by the way. Ngidi nowhere near as many wickets, but going for not as many runs. So they're going to have to make a choice, right? Which way they go in the middle. But I think the most interesting one is Coetzee, and then Trent Boult, who hasn't taken a lot of wickets, but no one's been hitting him in the middle overs at all. But then you have Van Meekeren, who's got a combination of taking wickets and going at a very, very, very good average. And what he's been able to do, if you've been watching him, is he has been hitting the pitch very hard. Also, on top of that, he doesn't bowl much with the power play anymore, and he has been bowling much in the death. They've really been using him as a specialist in this area. Tall guy, not quite as strong as Plunkett, but he's good at hitting the wicket. We've seen him do that before, even before this tournament, and he's been very, very good so far in the T20 World Cup. I thought he was excellent, but in the T20 World Cup, I thought that was more playing to the strengths that I thought he already had. Taking a couple of wickets up top occasionally, coming back at the death and doing well. This is a completely different role, and he deserves a lot of credit. 2 World Cups in a row, Van Meekeren has been in the better bowlers, and he was right at the top in that T20 World Cup, and maybe a slight step back here overall. But if you look at him from the middle, he's been exceptional. And I just want to go through some of his wickets today. This is just, we're going to have to look at that again. I can't just let you go here. This is a beautiful ball. If you face this in Test cricket, this would be a beautiful ball. That cuts back massively, gets a little bit inside edge. But it's been very good at getting little bits of lateral movement. And we're in the 18 over mark here. Exceptional bowling here, right? Really, really impressive. And again, hitting that wicket hard, getting stuff off the surface that we haven't seen as much with some of the other bowlers. This one, a little bit of luck, maybe overpitch this. 9 times out of 10, this isn't going to end up at slip. But hey, we take what we can get. And then this one here is a really good bowler. They showed Shakib having trouble with the short ball. They showed another ball. I can't remember who got him with the other short ball that was really similar. But when they showed the difference, you did realize this ball just bounces up really, really savagely here. Right? Really catches Shakib off guard. And this is clearly a tactic that teams are doing with Shakib, that back of a length outside off stump. But even so, just an excellent delivery. And then he went into the wicket again here. And this is an incredibly Liam Plunkett wicket, right? Just whack it in with the cross seam. Let a tail ender just swing across the line and find someone out on the boundary for you. So excellent work there from Van Meekeren. I really think that if you looked at his last couple of World Cups, he's probably one of the more underrated bowlers in the world at the moment. And he's not massively quick, but I do think his height and his intelligence really help him. And he can get lateral movement as well. He's a very, very good bowler. All right, let's have a quick look at all the Dutch bowlers, though, here, shall we? So this is the most wickets in this World Cup. Don't know why I've written runs here, my fault. But this is the most, I promise you, this is the most wickets this World Cup. I don't believe that Zampa is leading the World Cup with 16 wickets, although maybe he is. Let's just go through them a little bit. This is Bas de Leader. So Bas de Leader is probably in a full strength Dutch team. They would want him to be their 5th best bowler. As it currently stands, they've got him as their 4th bowler. But 10 wickets for him. I think he's going at over 7s. So he's certainly paying for all those wickets. It was funny, actually. Ramiz Raja was talking about on the tournament how the teams who are playing T20 style are doing the best, especially with the bat, and the teams who aren't are struggling. I don't think anyone's playing T20 style in this World Cup. What you're getting is teams are attacking at certain periods that they think that they have strengths in, but actually teams are really batting like the teams who are batting like 2019 England are doing very well. Teams batting like 2023 England not doing so well. And when you have your 4th bowler like Bas de Leader taking this amount of wickets, it keeps you in a lot of games. And if you think about the 2 games that the Dutch have won, this in South Africa, the wickets were really the most important thing. So you've got Bas de Leader as their leading wicket taker with now Paul van Meekeren, who, we've already discussed there, so that's fine. But just behind them is Logan van Beek, who is, again, another bowler who I think his ideal role, van Beek, is probably as your 3rd best seamer in a side. And what they've really making him do in this tournament is he's been their top and tail bowler, right? Like a lot of the time, he'll take the new ball and he'll come back on at the death. Quite often without Van Meekeren at the death as well. Quite often he bowls with de Leader or even Aryan Dutt at the death, where they're trying to they're trying to use everyone in their strength areas. But you probably want Van Beek to be the sort of guy who maybe bowls gets the ball around the 8th over, bowls a nice gutsy spell around the 30, 35 over mark, and then comes back on at the death with another good death bowler. And instead, he's up front and right at the end on his own. And he's done really well at times. And then you've got Aryan Dutt, who I'd seen him bowl before. It wasn't that I didn't think he had talent. A tall off spinner who gives it a rip is always going to be quite handy. But I'd seen him bowl a lot to be like, I can't see how he's suddenly going to come good in this World Cup, even with more favorable conditions. In fact, I've seen him bowl on some spin-friendly conditions and not be anywhere near as good as this. He has bowled exceptionally. Not only has he taken wickets, he's bowled in the power play, he's bowled at the death. He's been hard to get away at times. He's just been absolutely outstanding all the way through this. And considering his age, and again, a bit like Bas de Leader, you kind of want him to be, especially in the Dutch team, you probably want him to be the guy who bowls maybe the 4th most, is the 4th most important bowler or even the 5th most important bowler at his age, right? You want them to have their 3 main seamers perhaps ahead of him, and then have Roloff as the other spinner. And Roloff wasn't even playing today, of course. Have Roloff as the other spinner, and then have de Leader and Dutt maybe hoping that they'll get about 7 overs each, and then you can spell whichever other main quick. Scott Edwards hasn't had that. And so you've got 2 young players who have massively stepped up and got the wickets, and it's a big reason why they've done very well in this tournament. But let's have a look at their batting, because their batting's funny, and I would like to talk about how weird their batting has been so far. So where the Netherlands have got their runs is good. So obviously you expect your openers to do best, and then you expect, your middle, somewhere in here, you expect a couple of batters to have done well. You don't really expect your leading run scorer to be your number 7. And there's a few things that is interesting about this. One is they haven't actually had the same number 7 all the time. So it's been a couple of different players. And then the other thing is that it's until they get 5 wickets down, they don't seem to kick into any sort of gear. So it's a really, really weird situation you have here. We'll get to the openers in a minute, but oh my God. But this is the number 7 when you factor in average and strike rate. Just not only have they scored the most runs, decent strike rate, considering that the top 5 is or top 6 is not always making runs, and then averaging almost 50. You can see number 3 doing okay as well. That's I think mostly been Ackerman, and then Wesley Baresi, I think, went in there today. But this is the bit I really wanted to mention. Not only have they really got nothing out of 4, 5, 6 at all, which is also a little bit disappointing, This you can see that this is when their opener has faced the first ball. And I think the two guys have switched a little bit, but we will get to O'Dowd's form in a moment. But out of the striking opener, their record's not that much better than their number 11. I don't think I've ever seen anything that bizarre before. It just shows you what a random team they have been, because they've won 2 games and massively, all credit to them. They've beaten 2 test playing nations. They have done it while both times making subpar totals, probably, or certainly not batting as good as they should have against South Africa. But I think that was probably subpar. Certainly subpar against Bangladesh today. It's a tricky wicket. But, they should have made, even Netherlands should have made more runs. But they've managed to get these 2 wins, and they brought it together, and they're bowling by taking wickets, and their number 7 position by doing magical things has really been the difference. And let's get into who has made the runs for them. No surprise here, Scott Edwards is there, and then you got Engelbrett, who's played a couple of innings, I think now, and done okay, and then Colin Ackerman, who I said has been batting at number 3. This is their number 8, though, Logan Van Beek, who I think now is averaging over 30 in ODI cricket, by the way. I think he averages something like 34 for the Netherlands and, I don't know, like 16 or 17 in county cricket and domestic cricket in New Zealand. It's such a weird batting record, of course. And his batting was part of the reason they made this World Cup in the first place. But you can see Scott Edwards is doing great. And he's become like the hipster's choice, right, of this World Cup. And quite rightly, he said, "Oh my God," in a way today that should be a ringtone. His wicket keeping's very tidy. His captaincy has been great. And the way he bats, it's not just that he's making runs, of course. It's also that, the laps and the sweeps and the reverse sweeps and everything else. I mean, I've been saying for years, he's probably, he's certainly the highest volume sweeper in the world. I'm not sure he's not that far off being the best sweeper if you factor in the reverses and everything else. Maybe his slog sweep's not as strong as some of the other players, but certainly reverse and sweep, he just does it at a rate that no one else does. And he can lap, of course, and paddle and do all those things from the quick bowlers. So he's become the hipster's choice. Quite right. That's fine. But let us not forget that Max O'Dowd was the hipster's choice in the last 2 World Cups for them, opening the batting. And I just want to show you the stats because I've mentioned it a couple of times, but it is worth knowing he has been horrendous. And you've got him here and you got Meekeren Singh. So between the 2 of them, the openers have not done well. But this is the 2011 World Cup, and this is Max O'Dowd, and this is Scott Edwards. He made 2 50s in 3 innings, O'Dowd, and they didn't get through to the next round, but it wasn't for O'Dowd's lack of trying. And this is the 2022 World Cup. And again, O'Dowd did really well in this tournament, and Scott Edwards didn't. So it's just worth remembering that, like, sometimes someone sent me a message the other day when I was talking about O'Dowd's batting, going, "I don't know why you're focusing on substandard batting." The guy had done really well in World Cups going in, although, he could have said the same thing about England, if we're being completely honest. But it's just worth remembering that these 2 guys have swapped roles, when it comes to the runs in this tournament. That Max O'Dowd had been very good. The problem, I think, for the Netherlands and why they, at the moment, can't be more consistent is they are kind of putting their bowling attack together. If Glover was fit, if Glover was in form and Klaassen was fit, it'd be such a better team, going forward. Maybe for this World Cup, it doesn't matter as much, although, because Van Beek's been so good. But that would be certainly would help them a lot, so that they don't have to pull those bowling together. But the other thing is that at a World Cup, at one stage, they are going to need more than 1 batter to turn up, right? They're going to need a few batters to turn up. And so far, that's not been the case for them. All right. Shall we move on to, have we got anything more on them? No. We're going to move on to Bangladesh. And so this is balls per wickets for batters. This is not including runouts, by the way. Just because I wanted to have a look at, runouts is almost a separate issue when you're looking at this kind of thing. But I thought Bangladesh might be leading the competition when it came to wickets per balls for their batters. And you could see here, England losing a wicket every 25 balls. Not to mention they had 2 runouts in the other game. This could be lower. And Netherlands are struggling a little bit more. So I was like, well, why am I focusing on Bangladesh's wickets? That's because they've lost the most wickets in the power play so far. And you could see, they're quite a way up on the Netherlands. There is a difference here, and I'll explain it in a moment. But certainly, they've been horrible at the start. If you think about today, they really needed to be, none for 40, and they were maybe 65% chance of winning this game. And I'm not saying that they over-attacked or anything. I think it was just a couple of sweep shots, wasn't it? Well, certainly one sweep shot at the top there. But they just keep losing wickets up front. And considering I just showed you how bad the Dutch openers have been, this isn't just the Bangladesh openers. This is actually when they lose a wicket, quite often their number 3 has been going out. Shanto, has he been at number 3 the whole time? Probably hasn't. But Shanto has not had the tournament that, I was hoping he would, and Shanto was hoping he would. So they've been really, really disappointing. But I just want to factor in strike rate as well. So we can see that they've tried to score at a better rate. So Netherlands have almost got to the point now where they're just like, maybe if we just block it out. Shane Watson was saying in their last game that Netherlands need to put more pressure on everyone else when they open the batting. Well, they tried that and they went out. So now they're just blocking. But this is really, really disappointing. 12 wickets, a strike rate of 73, a bowling average of 22. Not where Bangladesh expect to be. The only thing I would say is that this is a team without, the friend of the Prime Minister and the recently unretired captain, Tamim Iqbal. And I've mentioned that before when they've been struggling in this tournament. But when you have younger players come in, they are going to be a little bit more hit and miss. Obviously, we've seen Rachin Ravindra, Aryan Bazdalida today. But there's look at Sri Lanka with the younger lineup. You look at some of the other younger players who've struggled at times in this tournament. It's tough in this World Cup, right? This is a big step up from bilateral ODI cricket, right? And it can be brutal on you. And with Bangladesh, some of those guys have been playing a lot of very good cricket, but they're just facing slightly better attacks at the moment, and it hasn't been working very well for them. However, it's not just the top of the order where they've been struggling. This is short ball wickets in this World Cup, and in fact, I've got an interesting story about this. So when the Dutch were trying to qualify for the T20 World Cup in 2019, they went up against UAE in Dubai, and they bounced the UAE team out. And I remember thinking at the time that everyone already thought they had a good bowling lineup. But I remember thinking at the time, going, this is a really interesting thing. You've got, this team bouncing someone out, in Asia on a wicket that generally doesn't help. Although, to be fair, I think that one in Dubai in that tournament certainly helped the bowlers a little bit more. But I think that the Dutch team is very good at bowling short, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. But I don't think it matters who's bowling short to Bangladesh at the moment. They're just getting so many wickets to the short ball. And there's another one, because I reckon I did this before they lost the last wicket. So I know that last one was a tail ender, but if you were actually doing the entire numbers, they would be slightly further in front than everyone else when it comes to losing short ball wickets in this World Cup. And this is, so it's them in Afghanistan. Afghanistan has only lost 7, whereas Bangladesh is now at 12. But the issue here, and you could put both of those teams in it, but the issue here for Bangladesh is the strike rate, right? So if you look at Netherlands, so the Netherlands are not handling short ball particularly well, and this is fine. Like, we can understand why these teams are having this trouble with it, and it's why I said at the front with Rachin Ravindra, what's such an important skill now, because there's so many more short balls. But the real issue, I think, here is that Netherlands are still striking at 120. And you can see, Pakistan again. So they are punishing you a little bit, these teams in this kind of area, before you get to, the 4 outliers. These teams around here are still punishing you a little bit. Bangladesh isn't really punishing you. You can bowl as many bounces as you want to them because they're only striking a run a ball against it, right? And so that over a long period of time, they're not going to score enough runs that is going to put any pressure back on you. So you can just keep going at them until eventually you get the wicket. That's a huge issue for Bangladesh, right? And if we just go here, so this is Van Meekeren. So I showed you this one before. Good ball, but look at the shot. It is such a wishy-washy shot. And it's the second time that Shakib has gone out to that. Like, if your kid did that, you'd be pretty pissed off at her, wouldn't you? You'd be like, come on now. What are you doing here? At least if it's short and you want to hit it. And if you're trying to guide it, maybe move your feet a little bit more, right? So Shakib's gone out to that shot twice in this tournament so far, and that's not ideal. But as I said, it's not the only one that they had today. So there was another one. I think the other one is Van Beek. Well, there's another couple actually. All right, so you got Tanzid here. Short ball, medium fast, get to top edge. We've seen them go out pulling quite a bit in this tournament. Again, just not particularly a good shot there. The ball's there to be hit, don't get me wrong. It's about the execution, but they're getting plenty of these balls to hit, and they're just not executing the short balls as well as they should be. It is a short tournament. The only thing I would say is it's a short tournament, pardon the pun, short ball tournament. But the only thing I would say is that there is a possibility that it looks a little bit worse than it should because of that. But I don't think that is the case. Another one here. I think this is the last one. So this is the tail again. I'm not having a go, but it just meant that the Netherlands could just kind of do that. I know that they were drying up the game, but huge for the Netherlands. Really happy that they've managed to do so well in this tournament so far. I think I had them as 2 wins as their best case scenario. They've got a lot of tournament left to be able to get a 3rd win. I know Paul van Meekeren talked about how he wanted to get them in a position. They wanted to get in a position to make it through to the semifinals. Obviously, that they're probably a step back from that. But 3 wins, I'd be putting it up on the whiteboard now of like, let's just get that next win. This is probably already the best World Cup they've ever had. I thought they were really good in the T20 World Cup, but I think they've been more impressive in this one. To come back from what happened against Australia as well. Really smart team. Really enjoy the way they go about their cricket, and I'm so happy that they've managed to be so good so far. So good so far. And even if they don't go any good from here on in, they've already had such a good tournament that they're doing very well. All right, that's the end of the scoreboard part of the tournament. A little bit longer today because we had the 4 teams, of course. We will have a break here, and then after the break, we will come back and I'll do questions. If you're desperate for your question to be answered, of course, the best way to get that answered is to what do they call them now? Super chats. Thank you so much for everyone's super chats. Can't even remember the name, but if you do have a question, there's a couple already lined up. But any super chats, I will definitely get to. Jared Kimber, Scoreboard. We're here every day. A few years ago, I had a panic attack after ESPN Cricinfo made me their global writer. I'd earned that position, but I also felt like a fraud at the time because I didn't really understand how I wrote. I understand that there was a process and gears and different styles and things, but how it all came together felt a little bit random. And so I began to panic like a golfer with a natural swing, worried one day I'd just end up with the yips. And would my career be over? So I took my writing apart piece by piece until I understood it. And then I figured out I could teach others all the mistakes I had learned. So I started an online course where I tried to make it as cheap as possible so people like me would be able to afford it. It's called Fans with Laptops, and heaps of people from around the world have used it so far, from first-time writers all the way through to professionals trying to improve. I started with a simple plan to make each writer the best they could be, and from the feedback I've received over the years, it seems like the course does that. But after COVID, my career changed. I came to YouTube, started podcasts, wrote emails, and formed a new career on my own going forward. So I now had something else to offer, the multimedia side of things, social media and everything else. Not to mention that I was building everything up as an independent. And so I added all of that to my course. So if you have ever wanted to work in sports as a writer or podcaster, making videos or anything else, Fans with Laptops is the place to start. If you think you qualify as a fan and you have a laptop and you want to work in sport, click on the link. All right, welcome back. Some questions here from Sriram. And thank you to everyone who's put the super chats in. There hasn't been only a couple today, but thank you to those who've been putting them through all the way. And I've marked all the normal questions, but if there are any more super chats, they'll automatically come up at the bottom. But he says, we all know Glenn Phillips is a part-timer, but whenever he comes on to bowl, he does the job perfectly. What's the reason for his success? Well, I mean, he hasn't always, right? He's taken more wickets at this World Cup than anywhere else. And also, I think they've used him really, really well, New Zealand. They have, I just want to have a look at his ODI bowling record. He's got an average of 28. And I think a lot of that is from this tournament. I think he was averaging well over 30 coming in, but they're very good. They use him in the right matchups is one thing. They don't over-bowl him in situations they don't think will suit him, which really, really helps. And he bowls like a very clever batter. But look, Glenn Phillips is the sort of guy, he can field, he can bat, he can bowl, he can wicket keep, right? He's an intense dude. Like, he loves cricket and he wants to be part of every single part of it. And so he's spent a lot of time working on his bowling after, trying to become a wicketkeeper for a long time. And he's a fine wicketkeeper as well. Not outstanding or anything, but could certainly do the job. And he just wants to be involved in every part of it. But he is smart. And I do think he knows where to put the ball. But there have been times in this tournament where he's got some lucky wickets, right? The Moeen Ali one, the Joe Root one comes to mind. Someone else he got in one of the other teams. And so that has happened. I thought today was the best he's bowled all the way through. I love the fact that they used him all the way as well. When he was doing well, the conditions were in his favor and everything else. But yeah, he gets through his action okay. As far as a part-timer, he's absolutely fine. There are going to be times when he gets hit out of the attack and all sorts of things. And we've seen that happen to him before, but he's doing great. DM says, what makes Matt Henry so exceptional at ODI cricket, but mediocre at T20? Barely plays the big leagues or T20. Never made sense to me as a New Zealand fan. Yeah, I know that he made a bit of a run at T20. I was working for some team. I can't remember who it was. And we had hired him, but it didn't work out because he couldn't come. But if you look at his T20 international record, it's only 12 games, 13 games. But he's got an average of 24. And if you look at his T20 record, altogether, it's an average of 24. But he does go for runs. And I think that's been his issue. And that comes back to what happened today, DM, which is he doesn't have a great slow ball. He's accurate, but he's not accurate in that kind of, I don't know, Dwayne Bravo, Peter Siddle kind of way where they can kind of be nagging and it's hard to get them away. I don't know if he has many tricks if the ball isn't seaming around for him. When the ball's seaming around for him, he does get wickets. And I think he's a threat to get wickets all the way through in T20, but he struggles on very, very flat pitches when teams are coming at him very hard, just because he maybe doesn't have as deep a bag as some of the other bowlers do. Honestly, he's the sort of guy, though, because he can take wickets with a new ball. If he could manage one good slower ball, that would probably be enough, right? And because I guess he'd be a higher wicket taker then as well with the slow. So people would ignore the economy for him. Suresh says New Zealand needs to stop winning hearts and start winning close World Cup games. Thoughts? I mean, that was an incredible chase. Like, they were behind massively all the way through in that game, certainly from the power play onwards, although they pulled it back a little bit in the middle. And then Australia kicked on at the end. They lost early wickets. They lost another clump later on, and they still got within a couple of runs. For me, this is nothing but good signs. I'm not too worried about the whole, they almost win the close games and everything. That's, these things happen. I don't think we have to worry about them struggling in those sorts of games. It's just they got behind in this game and they pulled themselves back, but not enough. AJ says, is Scott Edwards the only wicketkeeper who throws left-handed? Why do most wicketkeepers throw right-handed? I'm trying to think of someone else. There is another wicketkeeper, I believe. The reason that most wicketkeepers are right-hand dominant is because when you are wicket-keeping, the movement that you make the most is the outside edge or outswing, or even wobble ball, I suppose, this way these days. But it's beating the outside of a right-hander's bat. And so your right hand generally is the more dominant hand if you're a wicket-keeper. Because, I think wicket-keeping selects right-hand dominant people rather than you become dominant by wicket-keeping because of that, because that's the hand you have to go for one-handed more often than not. And even with a spinner, it's the one that is coming out to be able to do that. You don't take as many balls on your left-hand side. So I think it would make sense that if you're right, and we're talking about hand, but it would also be your eye and your foot. So you'd be right hand dominant, right foot dominant, right eye dominant, all those different things. And I believe that's the case. Yeah, science. Well, not science, really. Science-y? I don't know. Akash says, love your videos. I love you, Akash. Do you think the ICC and boards would be more motivated to save ODI cricket through any means possible if India win the World Cup, or is it a lost cause? I think if India win the World Cup and India decide that they want to do something with the World Cup, there's no way the other boards are going to be like, we're going to cancel this. They might say to India, well, you have to find a way to make us make more money off this. If India win this World Cup, there's no way it's the last World Cup. I don't think it was going to be the last World Cup anyway. I think at most I had it as about a 20% chance. I thought there'd be one more 50-over tournament at least. And so I do think if India win, that helps. But the problem isn't the World Cups. The problem is the bilateral stuff, right? And this amount of people, and this same thing used to happen with test matches. When we did Death of a Gentleman, we were in the middle of filming it, and Michael Atherton wrote a piece about it, and he said they're making a film about the death of Test cricket, but Test cricket isn't struggling. We had 2 great Test matches in the last couple of weeks, and I was like, Athers, that has nothing to do with it. We could have 10 great bilateral ODIs, and it wouldn't actually change the needle. You need management, you need investment. You need someone to say, we want to save it, which is what happened with Test cricket, to be fair. You need to work out how to make more money from it. You need to work out how not to lose as much money from it. All these things. That is what will save 50-over tournaments, 50-over cricket into the future. Anything else? IndyCar says, Mitchell Starc averages 40 in ODIs in India. Do you think there's a big prejudice in the way people look and compare players? Yes, I do, but absolutely nothing compared to what you're about to say. When spin bowlers perform in Asian conditions, people tag it as irrelevant. Okay, so there's a prejudice in what you've said in here, IndyCar. And I know you've released 100 comments. Please don't do that. It's annoying for everyone. This one comment was more than enough, right? You have said Mitchell Starc averages 40 in India. Right? Do you think there's a big prejudice in the way people look and compare players? When spin bowlers perform in Asian conditions, people tag it as irrelevant, right? So think about everything you've just said there. Mitchell Starc doesn't struggle in Asia. He's got a bowling average in Asia of, 26, 27. No one in Sri Lanka can hit him. But the UAE, I think the average is like 14, right? Too often now I hear, oh, this guy doesn't do it in India, so he's not good in Asia. India isn't all of Asia. And we don't even know what wickets he was on and what the conditions he was on in those particular tournaments. Australia's played a lot of ODI cricket in India where it seems to have been a lot of flat pitches where both teams have scored a lot of runs. Perhaps his record is partly due to that. But Mitchell Starc has also dominated a T20 in Asia, right? We know he does very well. I think at this stage in his career, it might be fair to say, not T20, the IPL. He had one of the best IPL seasons anyone's ever had, right? Just absolutely blitzed everyone. There's too much talk, I think, now of people only remembering what happens against India. And I understand that, 50% of the audience on most of my videos are going to be Indian, but not all cricket is in India and not all Asian conditions are in India. He's been a fantastic bowler. In fact, I don't think he is. This is why I think he's a terrible example for what you're talking about. I actually think Mitchell Starc is not a particularly conditions dependent white ball bowler, because essentially what he wants is swing, which is the very brand new ball is going to do that for about 2 or 3 overs for him. That's going to happen in most places in the world. Then he wants reverse swing, which again can happen in lots of different locations around the world. And he's going to bowl a lot of Yorkers. None of these things are actually that dependent on the conditions. There's a part of them that is, certain pitches help reverse swing more. And maybe you get the ball to swing a little bit more in, New Zealand or England than you can in some other places and all that sort of stuff. But he's actually almost the least dependent. So you're talking about other people's biases, but you haven't actually brought in your own, and you haven't really thought about who Mitchell Starc is as a bowler, right? The whole thing about when spin bowlers perform in Asian conditions, people tag it as irrelevant. What about England seam bowlers? They do the exact same thing. And we've just done a thing about Matt Henry, and specifically struggling in Asian conditions. And then when you do a deep dive, it's always far more interesting than that. I would say that spin bowlers outside of Asia and seam bowlers inside of Asia are the most prejudiced against, far more than the other way that you pointed here. It's a really interesting, question. But no, Mitchell Starc is a very good bowler in Asian conditions. He might not have done well in ODIs in India, but he could still. He was terrible today. Absolutely terrible. Almost gave the game away at the end. But he could still take a whole bunch of wickets and be a really important person towards the end of this World Cup. Because once Mitchell Starc gets on a roll, we know how good he is. And I don't think the Indian conditions are going to stop him from that. Flat pitches might. I don't think he's a very good bowler when the Yorker's working, or he's reversing it, or the ball swings early on. Which is he can do those things on flat pitches and non-flat pitches. But when he's not bowling well, he just sprays it on flat pitches. And if he can't get the Yorker working, or can't get the bouncer working, a bit like we were talking about with Matt Henry, he's a much better white ball bowler all round than Matt Henry. But again, he doesn't have as deep a bag as I've just done a video and looking at an over of Jason Holder. Jason Holder tried 6 different things in one over. Unsuccessfully, sadly for him. Mitchell Starc doesn't have 6 different things, right? So he can be one-dimensional, but when that one dimension works, he's going to run through someone in this tournament, or the next time he plays. That's just who he is. Shomik says, balls pitching outside leg and hitting the wickets is not out. This rule doesn't make sense to me. If someone managed to hit the wickets after bowling outside leg, then why is it not rewarded? Shomik, with your friends, I want you to play a game of cricket where that is a rule and see where everyone bowls. They're all going to bowl outside leg stump. And when you bowl outside leg stump, you can pretty much only hit the ball on the leg side. The reason this law exists is very, very simple. It's because if we allowed for this, we would have defensive bowling all the time. And defensive bowling sucks balls, right? It stops the amount of shots that you can play. It stops the amount of places that you could score on the ground. It's terrible to watch. That's why we don't have it. Mark Nicholas and Sean Pollock were talking about it the other day. It would be the worst law change. Cricket would be unwatchable, right? It would be so dull. It would completely change the game. It wouldn't improve it in any particular way at all. And we've had rules like this, or laws, I should say, like this, when it comes to fielding restrictions. So the reason we only allow 2 fielders behind square on the leg side is because off spinners used to bowl leg stump line down the leg side with like 2 leg slips, a fine leg, and a backward square leg, and sometimes even someone else up on the sweep as well, or catching for the sweep, right? And do you know what happened? And in-swing bowlers had similar fields as well. I've done a video where I talk about some of these fields. They were horrible cricket. We changed the law because we didn't want people bowling defensively over and over again. Because if you were facing an in-swing bowler or a short pitch bowler or an off-spin bowler, you could only play like 2 or 3 shots. This law would do the exact same thing. Andy says, please rank Wasim, Bond, Stain, McGrath during their primes. You've got to be more specific. Are we talking ODI cricket, which I assume we are? McGrath's the greatest ODI bowler of these players. If you're talking primes, I don't know, because I'd have to go back and have a look at how they are. But I would probably have it as McGrath, Wasim, and I can't even remember when. And then Bond and Stain. I thought Bond at his absolute best was as good as McGrath, but certainly, obviously, not for as long or anything else. I thought 2003 World Cup, there were times when Bond looked like the best bowler in the world. But there are probably times when McGrath looks like the best bowler in the world, maybe the back end of the 99 World Cup. Wasim Akram. What's peak Wasim Akram as far as ODI cricket? Is it probably late 80s? Is it almost between the 2 World Cups? I'd have to, again, go and look at the numbers. These sorts of questions, they're great, but it's hard. I would have to think of when each bowler was in their prime and go up against each other. But yeah, Bond certainly gets a boost for prime, but overall career would be well behind the other 3. Time says, will Bangladesh ever reach the top level of teams like Australia, India, and England? They've been stagnant as a team for a long time, while teams like Afghanistan have reached their level in a much shorter time frame. New Zealand didn't win a test series for the first 39 years they were in test cricket, and they became world test champions. Sometimes things take time. I actually think Bangladesh is a better team than Afghanistan. That's not to say that Afghanistan might not go past them now, but I think Bangladesh is still a better side. The Tamim injury might have played a part here. I think they've been also caught out by the fact that this is a World Cup where you have to take wickets, where teams are taking a lot of wickets, and they have a very defensive-minded bowling lineup. And I do think that has caused them some issues. I think they're much more consistent against the best teams than Afghanistan has been. But if you say Afghanistan's better in this one tournament, don't you have to factor in the fact that Afghanistan didn't win a game in the last World Cup? So no, I don't think that Afghanistan are on their level, but they've shown signs that they might get to it at the moment. And then I suppose the secondary nature there, of course, is that all teams develop differently and at different times. And I think Bangladesh made some huge errors. I also think comparatively, Bangladesh were promoted well before they were ready in a way that Afghanistan were not. I would say that when Bangladesh became a test playing nation, you could argue that Scotland and Kenya were better teams. Denmark and Argentina and early Ireland probably all deserved to be test playing nations before. And you look at New Zealand. New Zealand were a classic case of a team that was probably promoted a little bit too early. I don't really believe in the whole promotion thing, of course. Everyone should be allowed to play test cricket, and then you should work your way up into Division 1, etc., etc. But if we are going to have that, that's what you would argue. That Bangladesh and New Zealand are probably two classic cases of teams who were just given that test status too early, slightly for political reasons. In Bangladesh's case, also, they did have a really good 99 World Cup. But, there were other reasons why that was the case. Therefore, it develops a little bit slower. I also think their wickets are not, especially in white ball cricket, not helping them. And that's something they can, again, learn from late New Zealand, right? Of New Zealand going, okay, well, how do we make our wickets more like test wickets so that the best players that we have will be test players? And the same with, you could do the exact same. How do we make our domestic T20 wickets and our one-day, 50 over one-day wickets more like international ODI wickets rather than Bangladesh wickets? Because their players will still be good. They can, when they play ODIs at home or T20s at home, they can still have the Bangladesh wickets and roll everyone over if they want. But they have to also learn the other skills. And at the moment, you would have to say they are not. Vitamin says, Jared, there's a time when you wouldn't stop talking about Shanto. Talked about him today. The guy cannot seem to buy a run. Absolute disaster beginning to end. Do you still stick by your lofty praise of Shanto? So what's one of the reasons I've been praising Shanto? You have to, Vitamin, when you say something like this, you have to think back to what it was. It was because he was the worst batter in the world not that long ago, right? So Shanto was the worst ODI player in the world and maybe worst test player in the world as well for a period. Then he became incredible, started making all these runs everywhere against good teams as well, right? And now he's regressed a little bit again, right? We've got to have some understanding of why there was the praise for Shanto, because he'd done so well. Look, he probably underperformed, then he overperformed, now he's underperforming again. Right? What he has to work out is how to make runs consistently. But I think we have seen enough from him to say that he's a very, very talented player. The other thing is, we were talking about young players before, right? How old is Shanto? Is he 23, I want to say? 22? Oh, he's 25. He's a little bit older than that. But he's still making his way. He had a terrible run in international cricket, the likes of which some players would never recover from. And he did recover from it. And now he's having a bad couple of games as well. In the Asia Cup, he looked really good, Vitamin. No? He can play. But he's had a bad World Cup. It's okay. He's not the only one. Max O'Dowd is a good player. He's had a terrible World Cup. Manus Lavishane's a good player. He's had a dreadful World Cup. These things happen. AUS says, for New Zealand, it takes 5 years to have Rachin firing for them since the Under-19 World Cup. For South Africa, Britsky just made his debut and Von Tonda hasn't even made his. What's their secret sauce? They don't have a choice. They have to play those players. In South Africa, the talent that is coming through is so thick. And I would say they have too many talented players and not enough first-class teams to actually fit some of these players in. So look at Colin Ingram. Colin Ingram essentially retired after, I think did he play under 90 for South Africa? But he basically retired after school, right? And he was going to get an agriculture degree because he couldn't work out how he could get a game for anyone. There were so many talented players around. Ends up going to a school, play some cricket there. That leads to him getting a bit of a first-class thing. Devon Conway, right? Devon Conway, if he was a New Zealand cricketer, would have played so much more first-class cricket that he probably would have developed a little bit quicker. but he couldn't even get in the side. And when he did, he didn't make any runs because he was playing against really good bowlers, right? The level of talent in South African cricket means that you have to take a little bit longer to get into those sides. It is harder, right? Dilbert Brevis would be playing for a lot of teams, and he hasn't even played that much domestic cricket to be able to force his way in at the moment. In New Zealand, Corey Anderson was a 16-year-old who probably wasn't a frontline batter or a frontline bowler who was making his first-class debut. They didn't have anyone else, right? He's a big left armer who can bat a little bit. Corey Anderson had to play, right? Heaps of their players. And then you talk about international cricket, exactly the same. Martin Crowe, probably in a better team, averages close to 50 because he would have had to fight his way into that side. And by the time he did, he would have starred and would have been, huge and would have done that. Instead, he ends up, I think for the first, 4 or 5 years of his career, he averaged low 30s. I think that's right. And then he just absolutely blitzes at the back half of his career. But he had to play when he was young because they didn't have anyone else, right? Richard Hadley, 8 years of not being particularly good. They didn't have any other bowlers to keep him out of the side, right? And so you look at the history of New Zealand cricket and you get these guys who play a lot of first class and domestic cricket. They quite often, to be professionals, have to play in overseas leagues as well. So a lot of not county cricket, a lot of, league cricket overseas. They have to work out how to make it work for themselves. They have to do multiple roles because New Zealand don't have multiple options available for them. So sometimes they develop quicker. And look at Rachin. He's a perfect example of someone who probably has developed quicker because he's had to do like 20 different roles already, right? In South Africa, that's probably not going to be the case for some of these players. There's multiple reasons why that's the case. There's also, in South Africa, there's the racial part of this as well, right? Like there are players who are pushed. So there are a lot of really good school cricketers in South Africa, but they don't always push them into the first class teams and everything else because there's so many of them. That actually, what they want to do is see if there are black players and or any non-white players who don't come through that elite schooling system, who might be as naturally gifted as those elite schooling kids who haven't had a chance as well. So it's not even just about racial quota; it's also about that. There's so much going on, but South Africa has the best talent pool per capita of any cricket nation. New Zealand might have a great talent pool, but there's still only 20 people over there, right? So of course, Rachin Ravindra is going to be in first class cricket and representative cricket and international cricket well earlier than South Africans. It's going to be hard for them. Marco Jansen, everyone knew who Marco Jansen was, and he barely played any cricket in South Africa, right? And you're going to see that a lot. That was Irish, yeah. Time says, how much do you think associate cricket would benefit if leagues like the IPL didn't count associate nation players as overseas? I've said this before, but when I was interviewing for the job of a general manager of the IPL, this was one of the things I said. Because it's great stories. That's what I was saying to them. I was like, you can actually, win this over. And it wouldn't have to be the IPL. The other leagues could look at this as well. Associate nations, and maybe you cap it at 1. Maybe you cap it at 2. I don't know. But yeah, they would develop. But it's funny. The Big Bash is the one I would say who's the best at really marketing, Sandeep and Rashid and, non-traditional players and all that sort of stuff from a narrative and a story point of view. And that was where I really learned about it. And I was like, oh, this is an open goal for some, for the IPL or for another league to be able to do that. And, they've still had Ali Khan and Sandeep has played, and obviously Rashid Khan and Mujib and some of the other players and all that sort of stuff. Sikandar Raza as well. I know he's not quite the same, but it's a similar kind of, thing. And you do see how well those stories play. So I think it works, but in the IPL specifically, I think what the owners and ownership would have said to me would have been, that means we have less Indian players in. Why would we want that? Which is probably fair. Prash Mahesh says, for semis, what's better for India, bat first or second? Oh, I'd have to go into the numbers, mate. But my memory says that they prefer to bat second, right? So if they win the toss, they'll want to do that. I think they're a good enough team to win batting first or second. just because they are so even. But yeah, I would have thought for what they want to do, that would make more sense. And Andy says, how would you manage Bumrah moving forward? I'd like to have him specialize in white ball cricket. How many of India's ODI side would you take to the T20 World Cup? I mean, that's way too a question too far for me to start thinking about who their T20 side should be. How would I handle Bumrah? Well, I'd talk to him. What does he want to do? Because he hasn't played that much Test cricket. And I don't want to suddenly tell him he's a T20 specialist or a one-day or white ball specialist, as you say, if that's not what he wants. But what I might say to him is, we want you to play, but we want to, balance your workload a little bit. We still think you're in our best Test bowlers. If you say to us that you want to play for an extra couple of years at the end of your career, maybe Test bowling is not the ideal for you. I probably wouldn't play him in one-day cricket anymore after this. Certainly, I wouldn't play him in one-day cricket again, and until a year before the next World Cup. I think the skills that he has, I don't think they're going to disappear in the way that like the England batting skills do. Or certainly, I wouldn't play him in one-day cricket for the next 2 years. I just don't think there's any reason for him to play in that. So I'd say to him, what do you want to play? How much of it do you want to play? This is our idea. Can we meet in the middle? And see what he thinks of it, right? I think that's a big part of it. You have to talk to the players. It's funny. I was talking to a friend today, and he was saying, the players should do this, and this team should do this, and whatever. And I said, but you've got to factor in that these are human beings, right? And they have grown up wanting to do what they want to do, right? So yes, you can manage them better, and you can move these things around and everything. But you have to say to these players, this is why we think you should do this, right? But if Bumrah has dreamt his whole life of being a Test god, and maybe we don't, and I'm not saying this is the case, but maybe he doesn't like one-day cricket as much or T20 cricket as much. It pays him, so he's going to play it, and that's fine. But he's sitting there going, yeah, I didn't want to do that. Where there'll be other players that won't feel that way, right? Or there will be other players who will be more pragmatic and be like, I want to put an extra 2 or 3 years of earning in the back end of my career. I love Test cricket, but I can't do it, or whatever. Those are the sorts of conversations that you have to have with your, I was going to say with your best players, but with all your players. Anyway, that's us on the scoreboard. Thank you very much to everyone. This was a really late one, and the crowd just kept going up and up in here. So thank you for everyone for coming on board. We will be back tomorrow for the Battle of the Blue. Do we need clash strips in cricket? It's a weird one because I 100% agree that we should have clash strips in cricket, and it would be cool to see India come out in an orange strip, for instance, in one game, or for South Africa to bring their pink kits, or Australia to wear gold in one game and green in another, and all that sort of stuff. But I also think that we don't have clash strips in Test cricket. But anyway, Battle of the Blue tomorrow. We'll be back here. Thank you to everyone for supporting us. Comments, likes, subscribing, sharing, all these things help. And we will be back again, and we'll be back again, and we'll be back again, because this is the scoreboard, and it just keeps churning over. I suppose that's what, you turn over. You turn over the scoreboard, do you? Do you churn it? I don't know. Picture this. You made a video, and now you want the world to see it in their favorite social media platform. You could bowl into the wind by slaving away making edits, or you could let Memento effortlessly cut those epic moments down, making them perfect for your social media followers. It's like having a runner. You play the shot, and they do all the hard work. Sync up your podcast and YouTube, and they will be the substitute fielder who does all of the work. With Memento, you can craft a long innings down to the best highlights. Make your content, but let Memento cut it. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geoblock. Go to Surfshark and type my name in KIMBER and get 3 months free today. I know that you think you could run your favorite cricket team better than those who do, but no one is going to let you do that. So why not try Wicket Cricket Manager to satisfy that urge? Pick your nation, pick your league, pick your players, and yell at them when they do poorly. You can find it in the links below or by searching for Wicket Cricket Manager in your app store today. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. Cricket is about partnerships, and this show was made in partnership with HCLTech. Yeah, the company you see on the Australian shirts. Supercharge your technology with them